When a dream dies, it can feel like you died too. Not just disappointment, it turns into grief. Something that you were certain God authored, something you built your entire future around, is now gone. For me, that dream was full-time ministry. When God rescued me from my drug lifestyle, it was unmistakably miraculous, and almost immediately, I felt called into ministry. God even provided the money for my theological education in ways that I couldn't explain. It was a miracle. I was convinced that this was from Him. But over time, that dream began to die. It wasn't dying because I walked away from God, but because the church at large seemed unwilling to change. As I grew closer to God, I became more and more convinced that His heart was for disciple making within His church and transformation of cities, that it wasn't just about the Sunday. It wasn't about butts and seats. But my vision was repeatedly met with, well, that's just not the way that we do it. So what felt like obedience to God started to feel threatening to others. I got angry. I got angry that comfort seemed more important than calling. Angry that fear was allowed to dictate vision. And honestly, I grew a little afraid because I knew that my perspective wasn't the majority. And I could feel the distance growing between me and the leaders above me. And eventually I realized something had shifted. I could stay, but the joy was leaving. Or I could leave and grieve the loss of everything that I thought God was building. And that's when the confusion set in. Why would God orchestrate my calling so clearly, so miraculously, only for it to end like this? Did I miss Him? Did I just make it all up? Why does obedience seem so costly sometimes? It made future obedience far more risky. After all, we've only got so many years on this earth, right? And the lie that I began to believe was this: I must not matter to God the way that other people do. What made it harder was the advice that I was receiving from people they were just validating my concerns about the state of the church. Some offered solutions based on what they would do personally, but in reality, my problem, it wasn't theological. My problem was grief. I didn't need a new plan. I needed permission to mourn a dead dream. Everything began to change when I stopped fighting the loss. I realized that wilderness seasons, valley seasons, are actually opportunities to know God in ways that success never allows. There is spiritual nourishment even in the presence of your enemies. And for me, the enemy wasn't people. It was my own thoughts. And when I began to see the ashes of a dead dream as fertile soil, that was when I stopped resisting grief. I still grieve that dream. There are days that I wish I was still pastoring, but I grieve now with hope because God is a God who leads us to new doors, often better ones. After previous doors close, you can look back and you can see some ways that God allowed that dream to die, some reasons why. There, were things that needed shaping in my life, things like compassion, empathy, and wisdom, and they could have only been formed that way. I don't know if I could have helped others walk through dying dreams if I hadn't walked through my own. If you're watching this and your dream has died, before you move on, you have permission to grieve. Cry if you need to. Mourn the loss. A dead dream can hurt just as deeply as losing someone you love, and it's okay to question God. Grieving doesn't mean that you've lost faith. Sometimes it means that you trusted deeply, and God isn't done with you, even if the dream you loved is.